Okay. Okay. So, Parshas Beshalach, the Parshas of Shira, the Shira Oz Yashir Moshe V'nei Yisrael. What a parsha! So it starts like this. This is the conclusion of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It is the pinnacle. It is probably the most powerful of all the miracles that took place in our coming out of Mitzrayim. And of course, those miracles define for us the basics of our emunah, the basics of what we're supposed to believe and understand. I shouldn't even say believe, to know and understand about there exists a power that is outside of us, that is not part of our reality, and is beyond us, limitless. And that's, of course, the Borei Olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, the world didn't really know that until Avraham Avinu came along. And Avraham Avinu transmitted it in the DNA, the Ruchnius DNA, the spiritual DNA of all of Klal Yisrael, of all of his children to come, all that followed him from the Shvatim. There's a DNA of spirituality that we have, our neshamas, that is imbued. Every neshama is imbued. And the Rambam brings it openly. And the Rambam writes that during the time that Klal Yisrael for 210 years were in the bondage of Mitzrayim, so Kemat cut, it almost was lost, almost was cut off, that which Avram implanted into Klal Yisrael. That's what he says. That's the Lashon of the Rabbah. And that's why Hashem had to take us out early. I mean, the obvious question is, we all know this, it's a medrash that, if they'd stayed any longer, they'd be in the Memtes Shari Tuma. But we know Yisrael, Afal Pisha Chata Yisrael, who a Jew that sins is still a sin, it's still a Jew. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. So, okay, they would have fallen into the mire and to the, the cesspool of Mitzrayim. But why couldn't they get redeemed? Well, because what it required was that emunah, that reality that was implanted in every Jew, and that was dissipating over 210 years. And if they stayed on for longer, then it says they fall into they were in the depths of tumah and defilement. That was because they were slowly losing that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Avraham Avinu implanted in us. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu came along, and the purpose of that was to clarify everything, and not only for Klal Yisrael who were coming out of Mitzrayim, but for everyone, for the whole universe to see that there is a creator by the 10 Makos, of course, which were against, totally in opposition to nature. A Jew and an Egyptian could be drinking from the same cup, the same water. And for one, it was water, and for one, it was blood. Now, that's not part of our reality. We know one thing can't be more than one thing at one time. And at the same time, it was not the same thing, depending on who you are. I mean, that's like really strange. And, all right, so the Egyptians could play around with it, but the Chazal say that they got water. I always ask the question, where'd they get water from? We said the Khartoumim, the magicians and the soothsayers of Mitzrayim were able to also turn water into blood. Now, whether it was red or blood, I don't really know. But where'd they get the water from in the first place? For the Mitzrayim, it was. So some say they went to the ocean. It was only drinking water that turned into it, but the ocean you couldn't drink anyway. So I mean, it would be pretty bad salty water. So for your system, that is. I don't mean the taste. I mean, fine. It would kill you. Too much that would be no good. It's not. That's not a positive thing. So they took what. That's not what turned into blood. What turned into blood in the miracle was drinking water. the Nile and so on. But the point is that was what the miracles of the 10 plagues demonstrated. That there is a creator who can change nature, who isn't controlled by nature, who has different, there's no law. Nothing has to be anything other than what he wants. That's what came out of it. But after all is said and done, after the 10 Makkos, and even Makkos Bechoros, which that in itself is pretty powerful, right? That's why they kicked them out of Mitzrayim. They chased them out of Mitzrayim until they realized that they made a terrible mistake and they wanted them back. And then they chased them into the sea and up to the sea. And then the sea split and it turned into dry land. No, there are a lot of scientists that like to play games and they say there was some sort of a comet. So Velikovsky has these theories. There was this comet that came just at that time and split the waters. Right now, if you split the waters, what would you be walking in? Mud. The waters, it didn't dry up, right? Except the pasuk says they were bayabosha, but so chayam, they walked on dry land. We'll get maybe into that a little bit later too. But what I'm trying to say is that this was the pinnacle. This was the point that the world, except Amalek, of course, even but he decided not to pay attention to it, and he kind of couldn't handle it, and that's what we say in the Oz Yashir, and when we sing the song of the splitting of the sea. Oh, thank you. That's that was for emphasis. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, but they all of them were frightened. The world, all the nations of the world, Edom, Plishtim, they all stood there in awe of what was taking place. What took place? The ocean split open, 12 different avenues. And Klal Yisrael in each Shevet went across. So, I mean, that was it. That was the pinnacle. So let's start again. Klal Yisrael standing at the edge of the sea, and they're stuck. Got Egypt in their back. They got the desert on their side. Where are they going to go? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ma titzak elai. Well, like Jews, they started screaming, and they started davening. I mean, the Tzedakah was davening, a type of Hashem. All right, you did all those things in Egypt. What are you going to do? You brought us out here that you did all that just to bring us out here, and then we're going to die here? No. So they started to call out to Hashem to help. And what did Hashem say? Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, ma titzak elai. What are you davening for? Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael. Tell them to move on. Now, the problem here is that what does a Jew do when he's in trouble? He daven to Hashem. What was wrong with what does he tell him not to daven? To stop davening. Don't daven so much. Don't chuckle. Get going. Move. How can you expect them not to daven? Didn't David HaMelech say, Min HaMeitzar Karasika? I called out to Hashem when things were tight, when things were very difficult. And through your answer widened everything up. I mean, you saved me, Hashem. So you have to daven. You have to ask Hashem to please help. And the actual beginning of the redemption began with Vanitzak el Hashem Elokei Yisrael. They davened to Hashem. They called out to Him. Elokei Avoseinu vayishma Hashem es koleinu. He heard their voice. He heard their cry. Vayares anyenu, and He saw our persecution. We say it in the Agoda, of course, if we pay attention to it. There's Amoleinu and all the work that we have to do, Veslachatzenu, and the pressure that they put on us. Vayotzienu Hashem Mitzrayim, and He took us out of Egypt. Biyod Chazokov, Zor Netuya, outstretched arm, strong hand. Umayra Godol, but also some Umofsim, there were amazing miracles that took place. Okay? So that's how they got the miracles. Vanitzak. They called out. So what was wrong with them calling out now? So the Or Chaim HaKadosh has a very beautiful explanation. And he says like this. You see, at the Yam Suf, the Midas Hadin was prosecuting the Jewish people. And they say, wait a minute. Why are you helping these people? Said the Midas Hadin. Halalu of the Avodah Zorah, halalu of they came from that miserable place is equal to the Egyptians. There was no different than the Jew and Egyptian. To the point, I think we may have mentioned this. It says, am I doing something wrong? Maybe. They were Egyptian, and the pasuk said it's an open pasuk. Did that ever happen? One nation from the innards of another nation. And Rashi brings out immediately and says, it was like a farmer whose cow is about to give birth and she's having trouble. So he sticks his hand in and he pulls out the calf. That's how we came out of Mitzrayim. Now if we were an embryo in Mitzrayim, and that was how we began. That's how our birth was the Yetzias Mitzrayim. So then we were a part of Egypt. The Gemara says, Ubar Gerach Imo, that the fetus is another limb of the mother. So we're the same thing. So how can you save these people and you don't save these people? These people, the Egyptians, you're going to kill in the water. And the Jews you're going to save by splitting the sea. Halalu of the Avodah Zarah, halalu of the Avodah. They both were idol worshippers. The Midas Hadin would not be overridden with simply davening. Davening is very powerful, but not when you're talking about two equal things. And why should he pay special attention to us? This is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "Matitzak Elai." What are you davening for? Davening isn't going to stop the Midas Hadin. The only thing that would help them was Mesirus Nefesh. Now, Mesirus Nefesh doesn't mean that I have to die. Mesirus Nefesh is not to the point that I am willing to sacrifice my life. Mesirus Nefesh. And as I explained a number of times here, I think that the word Nefesh means to want. Avraham Avinu says, "Im yeshes nafshechem." When he wants to bury Sarah, he wants to buy the land, he says, "If you're willing to give it to me, im yeshes nafshechem." So, im yeshes nafshechem. Your willingness, the will, is nefesh. So, Mesirus Nefesh means anytime I do something contrary to my desire, my will, what's pushing me. I mean, we all have the desire of self-preservation, no? Even the cat has it. I mean, we certainly have it because we have something to live for. And we have the intelligence and the consciousness. So, Mesirus Nefesh means to be prepared to override what my desire is. So sometimes the Mesirus Nefesh can be, sometimes it took powerful Mesirus Nefesh because you're talking about life and death here. Okay, now, Yetzias Mitzrayim was what is called Isarusa de Le'ela. This all stemmed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was his will to get us out of Mitzrayim. He wanted this. It was his awakening. Now's the time to do it. And Isarusa de Le'ela is, there's no stopping that. But to override the Midas Hadin, that had to require an Isarusa de Latata, which means it had to start from us. And it had to show Mesirus Nefesh. It had to show that we're prepared to give it our all, even our lives. And then the Midas Adin shuts up. You can push it aside. And Nashon ben Aminadab jumped into the water up to his nose. And he said, Higiu mayim ad nofesh. I can't go any further because I'm going to die. And everything split. So it was the Mesirus Nefesh. They were terribly terrified, the Jews, because they saw these Egyptians. And Rashi says something very interesting. It says, Vayisu b'nei Yisrael eseineihem. They lifted their eyes to see. V'hinei Mitzrayim nosei achareihem. They didn't have to lift their eyes to see. What does it mean? Vayisu eineihem. They lifted up their eyes. So Chazal learned, this is Torah Sheba'al Peh, that they were afraid because they saw the Sar, the archangel of Mitzrayim, coming to do battle with them. How are they going to survive that? It was bad enough in Mitzrayim. We had to deal with the men. Now we got to deal with their spiritual kochos. How are we going to do it? They were afraid. And in order to override something as powerful as that, they needed Mesirus Nefesh. And that's what happened. So we see there comes a time in certain circumstances, and there aren't that many. I mean, if somebody tries to make you kill somebody, you're not allowed to do it. You have to give it. You don't pay attention to pikuach nefesh. Usually, any mitzvah in the Torah, if it's a matter of life and death, you chas v'sholem, you can do the aveira. Shabbos, even Shabbos. If it's pikuach, you hatzalah, right? All you need is look at what hatzalah does, right? When there's a car coming in Beit Shemesh, you know it's hatzalah. I mean, right? They're mechal Shabbos. No, they're keeping Shabbos. That's called Shmiras Shabbos because you're supposed to do that. So when there's a life that's in danger, to save a life, you can override the Aveira. Almost every, except three. Gilu Arayah, Shvichas Domin, Avodah Zarah. You can't do Avodah Zarah. You can't do murder, and the immoral relationships. If they try to tell you to do it, or they're going to force you, they'll kill you if you don't. Let yourself be killed. Avodah Zarah, Shvichas Domin, murder, and Arayas, but nothing else. And here, what was it? They were facing something so very powerful that they realized that it wasn't just a simple thing, because what was coming after them was not the physical Egyptians. Big deal. Vayisu eineihem. They lifted their eyes upward and they saw that the spiritual powers that were governing the Egyptians were coming after them. So without Mesirus Nefesh, that doesn't work. And then we see something else. This is also amazing. The Medrash says like this: Vayaron vayonos. When the sea saw, it ran away, meaning it split. So what did it see? What did it see? The Gemara asks, what does it see? Arono shel Yosef. It saw that they were carrying the casket of Yosef HaTzadik because he made them promise that they would take him up. He was a hostage in Egypt. And they took him out. And nobody really knew where he was. He was buried in the Nile. And everybody else was busy during Koshech finding out where all the Egyptian hoarded their money. And Moshe Rabbeinu was busy looking for the Aron Shel Yosef. And the Aron of Yosef.
Did they know where the other brothers were?
Yeah, but the other brothers didn't ask to be buried.
But they did pay.
They didn't make him, but they did take him with. But he didn't make them promise to take him. Mm-hmm. This the pasuk openly says that he made them promise. So he said, "I have to fulfill the promise that we made to Yosef." Now, it says that when they saw the Aron of Yosef, the sea ran away. Now, what does that mean? What was so special? Moshe Rabbeinu was there, 3 million Jews at least, if not more, because the Erevav went with them. They weren't Jews. None of them were Jews yet until they came to Har Sinai. So they were all there. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, Miriam. He had all the Nevi, everybody. And that wasn't enough. And he had to wait until the casket of Moshe. So it says that because Yosef was so Moser Nefesh, he so overcame the seduction of Eshet Potiphera with all his might, a 17-year-old kid. He was 17 years old. And this was Egypt. I mean, it was worse than Las Vegas. You have to understand what was the culture then. And he was able to withstand it, and it was everybody was doing it. So what we have to realize is that what saved Yosef was that little bit of DNA that he had, his father. He recognized he appreciated where he was coming from. And so we said last week that the children and the elders, they were together. No generation gap. What's the big deal? Because each one was transmitting the spiritual DNA of Avraham Avinu that he put inside of us, so that it should not ebb away. That's what Hashem was seeing that was going to happen, and that's why he had to take us out. So they used that, and Yosef Atzadik got that. What gave him the power to be Moser Nefesh? What gave him the power to overcome his natural desires? Was that DNA that Avraham Avinu instilled into him, into Yitzchak, into Yaakov, his father. So, by the way, the same thing applies to each and every one of us. That's how you merit to get out of Mitzrayim. We all have some level of Mitzrayim that we have to deal with, our own personal Mitzrayim. The Nesiv Shalom, the Slonimer Rebbe, that sometimes a person feels that they're caught in a rut, spiritual rut. And it seems sometimes very difficult to overcome. But derech hateva, normally, no matter how hard we try, sometimes no matter how many times we decide we're going to get out of this, we're not going to do this anymore, or we're going to do this thing, goes back to the same place. We're in a rut. We dig ourselves into a rut. Personally, now that's called being in Mitzrayim. The way to break out of that rut is a little bit of Mesiras Nefesh. A little bit to be able to demonstrate that I'm prepared to overcome my natural instincts, my desires, the me, myself, and I kind of thing, numero uno, me. So that's acting l'malam min hateva. That's Mesiras Nefesh. Yosef Atzadik did it. And in order, the whole process of Yetzias Mitzrayim, as I said, came from Hashem, the time he was taking us out. That was up to the sea. But whenever you have a situation where HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrates himself and reveals himself into the world, where it's so obvious and clear that he's running the world, there has to be a response. And at the sea was our response. And the response from Hashem, in other words, it was an Isa Arusa Delatato. We began that with our Mesiras Nefesh, and once we began with Mesiras Nefesh, the outcome was so far greater than all the miracles of Mitzrayim, the splitting of the sea. It's unbelievable. After Kriyas Yamsuf, miracles took place because of Mesiras Nefesh. Purim, the Nesa Purim. So we're getting close to Purim soon. Yes, talk about the Nesa Purim. It was, they fasted, they davened. They all got together. They realized that their lives were at stake, and they davened. But that's not what saved them. What saved them was the Mesiras Nefesh of Mordechai in not bowing to Haman. He put his life in danger. And Esther, was that not Mesiras Nefesh? Esther goes to the Melech, and anyone that came there without being called was killed. And she was prepared to die. But I have to do this. It's Klal Yisrael that's at stake. Lahashmid, lahara, l'abed, it's kol Yehudim. I've got to save the Klal Yisrael. Mesiras Nefesh. Hanukkah, all these came out after Kriyas Yamsuf. Hanukkah was not Mesiras Nefesh, 13 men against the entire Greek army. Is that possible? Of course not. Did they think they were going to make it? Not really. But they had to jump into the water. They had to do it. They had to show that they're prepared to give up something. Says that by Hanukkah, the Chashmonaim, when they went out to battle, what they said was David HaMelech Yoshe B'Seiser Elyon. That parak in Tehillim. What's Yoshe B'Seiser Elyon? It's called the Mizmor of B'Tochen. Because Omar LaHashem Machsi Tzudasi Elokai Evtach Boch. I'll rely on you, Hashem. I'm prepared to rely on you, Hashem. That's Amunah. It's Amunah Tahora, Shlema, to acknowledge that only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and whatever he does is the right thing. Now, it's very interesting. As I'll say that we are called Ivrim. Now, everybody thinks we're called Ivrim. Why? Because Avraham Avinu was on one side and the rest of the world was the other. But that was an individual who was called Avraham Avinu. But Klal Yisrael were called Ivrim. Why were they called Ivrim? Because they were over Yam. They came through the sea. Klal Yisrael came through the sea, and because of all of that Mesiras Nefesh, of jumping into the sea, and going through the water, and even walking through the water on dry land took a lot of Mesiras Nefesh, because who says it's not going to fall down on our heads? They got the name Ivrim because they were over Yam. They crossed the sea. They got a new name. The Rambam, very interesting, says when the person does tshuva, one of the ways you do tshuva is acquiring a new name. One of the ways, I'm not the same person, but doesn't mean you have to, anyone that wants to do tshuva has to change his name. It doesn't mean that. It means that I'm not the same person that did that. I'm taking on a different identity. And the name is my identity. Yonah Hanavi. This is amazing. Yonah Hanavi was on a boat, running away from Hashem because he didn't want, and his intentions were, the reason he didn't want to do what Hashem told him was because he was afraid Klal Yisrael wouldn't listen, and that Nineveh would listen, and Klal Yisrael wouldn't listen, and it would be a big tfiyah. It would be a terrible, terrible claim against Klal Yisrael. So he ran away. And what does Hashem do? I mean, he ran away. But what did Hashem do? He brought a big storm, and the boat was about to capsize, a big ship. And everybody is calling out to their gods. And Yonah goes to the bowels of the ship and goes to sleep. Now, it doesn't mean he just laid down and didn't pay much attention. He went to sleep. He was able to sleep. So the captain, they drew lots to see whose fault it was. See, they had some spirituality to them. They knew it was coming from a different source. All of them, even these fellas these sailors on the ship. So they drew lots to see who's at fault and who does it fall on? Yonah. Where's Yonah? Where is it? They go down into the bottom. There's Yonah. He's asleep. They wake him up, and he says, "Ma malachtacha. What are you doing here? What do you do? What is your what do you do for a living? And where do you come from? Ma'artzecha. What land do you come from? And what nation do you belong to?" So what does Yonah say? Ivri Anochi. He says, Malach nirdam, why are you sleeping? He says, Ivri anochi. What? Why? Ivri anochi es Hashem Elokei hashamayim ani yorei asher osa es hayom ve'es hayabosha. Mr. Captain, I'm an Ivri. I went through the Yam already. The Yam, the water, the sea, the roaring sea doesn't affect me in the least. I couldn't care less. I know what's going on. I could go to sleep. I don't have to do. I mean, what? Throw me over into the water. See, I don't care. And they did. And sure enough, we know the story. And so on and so forth. But he said, Ivri Anochi. I'm an Ivri. I've passed through the water. The water is not my problem. That's not a problem for me. You know, when Hashem, you have to understand what's going on here and what Kriyas Yam Suf was all about. When Hashem created the world, on the third day, he said, Yikavu amayim mitachas hashamayim el mokem echad. All the waters should gather into one place. They say, Uraya hayabosha. And the sea will, and the land will be visible, meaning there'll be a place for human beings couldn't exist in the water. So this was the beginning of making a place for a man to exist, to live, because we're not fish. There's a place. He said, gave the world, he gave all mankind a place to live, to be. Shamayim, Shamayim, Hashem, v'oretz nosan livnei Adam. By the way, he did it for one man. All of that he did for one man, Adam Arishan. So I'm not going to do it for all of Klal. So that was another answer to my titzak Evai. What are you worried about? I did it for one man. I'm not going to do it for all of Klal Yisrael. But he created at that point the place for mankind to exist. We are not like everybody else. We have a special place. We are people who are Ivrim. We were over Yam. Our place is not the same place. Shemaim, Shemaim, Hashem, or it's not sounding Adam, but he gave Klal Yisrael a special place. And only we can live there. And when the Egyptians tried to follow us into our place, they couldn't. They couldn't. Yeah, indeed, we are on a different side. We are really Ivrim, just like Avraham Avinu. The rest of the world is one side. We are different. And I'll tell you how different we are. This is an amazing statement. The Gemara brings, Gemara Pesachim, that Pasha Zivugo Shalodam Kekriyas Yamsuf. That for a Jew to get married, that means both, men, women. To get married, that's a Zivug, it's double. It's as difficult as Kriyas Yamsuf. Pasha Mizon Nosav Shalodam, making a living, is Kekriyas Yamsuf, like Kriyas Yamsuf. What does this mean? The entire world gets married. Who doesn't get married? I mean, today, I'm not talking about today. Today, we're living in a world where there's total confusion. Nobody knows what they're doing. They have no perspective or perception of what the reality of life is about. But let's assume, okay? But they all get married. Everyone gets married. They find them, whether it lasts, it doesn't, but they get married. If they're not selfish. Everybody, I always used to say, the most selfish human being is a baby until you decide not to get married and have children. Then you become a baby. Then you become the most selfish entity because you're only doing it for yourself. I don't want to be bothered. You know what it takes? We know. Okay, now. So we are being told that Zivugo Shel Adam is different. It's not like everybody gets married. We get married only like Kriyas Yamsuf. Why? Because Kriyas Yamsuf created our unique position in the world. So all of those things that the rest of the world do as, every day kind of thing. For us, it's special. Doesn't mean it's as serious. When it says kosher kriyas yamsuf, it says serious for us. It's not just stam we're getting married. It's not stam you're having a parnasa. Parnasa is coming to us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In order to achieve them, we have to know how difficult and how special our marriages are. That it's like kriyas yamsuf because we are ivrid. We are different. And that difference between the Jew and the rest of the world is something that has been watered away and whittled off and does not have the same input, same importance as the rest of the world as it used to be. Talk about Parnasa, right? It's hard like kriyas yamsuf. So there's in the Gemara in Kedushin, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer Ra'isi, Lo Ra'isi miyam, no, Ra'isa, did you ever see miyamecha in your entire life, Chaya ba'ov sheyesh lahem umnus, that they need a profession? Did you ever see a bird or a cow or a lion that needs a profession? No, they ain't misparnasim and they have their food, no profession. They didn't even go to college. How do you like that? And they still have what to eat. Shalom b'tzar. I mean, sometimes it's a little difficulty, but mainly it's without tsar. Yeah, a juicy little, sheep comes by, the lion will have what to eat. But all those cows and all those wild animals and all those birds were created for my benefit, he says. V'ani nivreisi l'shameshes koni. And I was created for the purpose of serving my master, which is Hashem. Certainly I should have a parnasa without difficulty. If I'm here, they're here to serve me, and they have no problem. I'm here to serve Hashem. Why do I have a problem? Ella, but sheharosai maasai. I didn't act properly. You see, they don't have to act properly. They act as they're made to act. They have instincts, and they act according to their instincts. But I have choices. I told you, my granddaughter, bless her, one of my granddaughters, bless them all, but one of the granddaughters, Elisheva, she has a beautiful two little girls. She has more now, but at that time, one of them was, I don't know how old, 4 years old. She was 4 years old. She was going outside to play by a neighbor. And she said, Shalva, that's the name of Shalva. Shalva, you're going to play with your friend? Make good choices. You hear that? She instilled in her child, that 4-year-old, that's what we're here for, is to make choices. And they have to be good choices, the right choices, the kind of choices I taught you, the kind of choices Hashem teaches us. My actions were not good. My actions were bad. Viki pestius parnasi, and therefore I don't have any parnasa. So they don't have to serve Hashem to have a parnasa. They don't have a parnasa. They'll put the money in the stocks and it'll be all right. For us to put our money in the stock market and to get something out of it, we have to be worthy of it. That's because we came through the Ivri Anoch. I'm different. Nobody else is like that. Oh. The difference between Yetzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf, splitting of the sea, is that what gave us that power was the fact that the Kriyas Yamsuf was a response from Hashem to our prayers to save us from falling into the abyss. But now that we are out of the abyss and that which Avraham Avinu instilled in us, that DNA of Emunah, that Avraham Avinu that was his absolute essence of Avraham Avinu, was to instill Emunah in Hashem. He was born into a world that they had no Emunah into Hashem. They had all kinds of Emunahs, but they were relying on the wrong thing. They were, I always say, there were powers in the world, and they were each one was doing their service to that power which they happened to like. If you wanted to take in the army, if you want to take a day off or a weekend off, who do you go to? Do you go to the sergeant? You're private, yeah? You go to the sergeant, or do you go to the general? Who do you go to? The sergeant, of course, because he's one above you. He's the one that is the wielder of power, not the source of power. Stupid people, Avraham was saying, how foolish you are. You're going to the wielder of power. This thing has a power. This thing has a power. That thing has a power. But we go to the source of the power. And that's what Avraham Avinu instilled in the DNA of every single living Jew. That comes natural. But sometimes there's a lot of silk that's covering it over. The Rebbe Lapin, my Rebbe, I was in Yeshiva, in Kar Hasidim. So my Rebbe said, we say, Shir Amalas mi makim krasika Hashem. And we say, it's Shir Amalas. We have been saying it now with all war going on. We were saying it every day, 3 times a day. Shir Amalas mi makim krasika Hashem. From the depths do I call out to you, Hashem. So he said, now you have to understand what you're saying. Shir Amalas mi makim. From the depths. What depths? From that little pintala yid that we all have within inside of us. That little point. That DNA that Avraham Avinu gave us. It's from there we're calling out to you. Yeah, there's a lot of things covering it up, and we don't always act that way, and we should be better, and we which is true. But we can call upon that point within us that was given to us by Avraham Avinu. What an amazing thing. Mima makim. That's when we say that to them. Kufamin. You have to know that what we're talking about is we're calling out from the depths of our strength. So that's why what took place at the sea was totally different than Yetzias Mitzrayim. There was a gilui, a revelation of Hashem's presence in the world. They said what they did was, in the Shira, what does it say? Zekeli vanveyu. They pointed, they saw everything. They had an understanding that this is the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, this is Hashem, that He is the source of existence. That's what Yud-Kei Vav-Kei means, existence. Is. He is. The Yud-Kei Havaya, He is. In other words, nothing else is. We don't have is until He gives it to me. I'm here now, this second, not because I was here a second ago. I'm here because Hashem is willing me to be here. Every instant I am being kept. Now, look, obviously we're talking about something that we have no perception of because it's not part of our reality. We can't. But we have to know that we can access that world. And the way we access that world, number one, is with Mesiras Nefesh, but number two, which is, maybe I should say, is number one, pre 1A. It's before it all, is that Emunah that Avraham Avinu gave to us, just like He gave to the rest of the world. Now the rest of the world choose to ignore it completely, and they don't have it. And that's why there was a bris from Avraham Avinu to all of his progeny afterwards. I'll tell you one thing else, which is very beautiful. Have a few more minutes. So it says there, that the shifcha, which is to take the lowest level of who Chal Yisrael were. A maidservant that was not, probably came from outside of, not one of the family, and so on and so on and so forth. And she saw more of how Hashem runs this world than Yecheskel Hanavi in the Maaseh Merkava, which is the highest level of Nevuah. She saw that. That was clear to them. Can't be any other way. Just like at Maimon Sinai when they heard Hashem. That's what was at the sea. That's what happened. And that's what came out of the sea. They saw. So the Gemara brings like this, very strange kind of a statement. Lo nidna Torah ela la'ochlei mon. The Torah was not given except to those who ate mon. The people who stood at Mount Sinai ate mon. Hello? Like what? They needed to live. They needed to. What does that mean? So the Ramban says like this: that the Ziv Hashchina that they saw, that they experienced, Nisgashe, it became physical. V'ratzon borei, for in Hashem's, because Hashem wanted it to be physical. That's the Ziv Hashchina became physical, that they were able to eat it. And what does it mean to eat it? It sustained them. Everything that exists, angels, animals, people, Jews, need something to keep their body and soul together. Needs a life force, needs food, needs something to keep the two together. That's what food is. It's sustaining us. We live on it. In the Midbar, they lived because they perceived, says the Ramban, the Ziv Hashchina. And the Ziv Hashchina turned that Ziv Hashchina into something that is physical. Now, who else is sustained by the Ziv Hashchina? That's the Malachei Hasharis. All the angels, they have to have food too. What's the food? What sustains them? The Ziv Hashchina. What happens in Olam Haba? There's no eating, there's no drinking, no sleeping. There's only Yoshvim v'ne'anim miziv Hashchina. We have in Olam Haba, we are infused and sustained and elevated and full of joy because we are now having the Ziv Hashchina within each and every one of us. Now, lo nitna. So that was the mon. When the mon fell from Shamayim, that's what fell, the Ziv Hashchina. But it became physical. It had a smell. You could taste it. You could feel it. You were satisfied when but it was the Ziv Hashchina that they were eating. So therefore, lo nitna Torah elo lo mon, because they had to be on the darga, on the level of ochlemon, of eating the Ziv Hashchina. And that's why when the bracha that we make on the Torah is Asher Nosan Lanu Torah Se'emes V'chayei Olam Nota B'Socheinu. He implanted everlasting life, which is the Hashchina. So that's what we got at Maimon Sinai. And you had to have that to be present at Maimon Sinai. Okay, now, all I can say is this. Shabbos Shira, everybody, it's a special time. The song they sang Oz Yoshir, but that too we have to know. It shouldn't say as Oz Yoshir Moshe. It should say Oz Shor Moshe. What's the Yoshir Moshe? And Chazal say that that's the proof that there's Tchias HaMeisim Min HaTorah, because we will all be singing. So if you want to know what's going to take place at when Mashiach comes, Behiram Yameinu, very quickly, because it can't get much worse. Can't get much worse. Because we're in a situation where, the world has gone, it's just fallen apart. There's nothing that makes any sense anymore. And that, to me, is the biggest riot that it's. Why? Because nothing makes any sense. So to us, those things that are happening make no sense to us, but it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, coming from there that I have no perception of. So when that is happening and I can't understand it, I have no perception. I don't know, is he good? Is he not good? Is it this? Is he that? Is this one going to start? Is that one going to start? He wants credit. She wants credit. Everybody wants that. He gets, the world is in chaos. It's chaos. That means Hashem is, And so if we want, what's going to be when Mashiach comes? We're all going to sing. Oz Yashir Moshe. Klal Yisrael is going to sing. And what are we going to sing? And from where? Even if you don't have a good voice. What are we going to be singing? We're going to be singing the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that will take what comes out into beautiful music. That's what's in store for him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should just give us the strength to be able to overcome all the necessary the pitfalls that we're facing. And it's necessary because Hashem is creating them. We should overcome them, and we should stand and praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything that He's done and everything He will do. Baruchim to you. Yes, ma'am.
The Ron Greeley says, I read this morning, his body is showing.
His body was showing.
Yeah.